Out here, the woods don't lie. Every trail tells a story, and we're here to read it. This is the Field Days podcast, where passion meets habitat. Hosted by Jason Say, whitetail enthusiast and food plot guru. Brought to you by Magnet Outdoors Premium Food Plot Seeds, because big bucks start with a well-planned strategy.
Hello and welcome to the Field Days podcast. I have a familiar face and voice here. It depends on if you're listening or watching this thing, but I have Jason Lupardus. And I think you're the CEO of Turkeys for Tomorrow, correct?
Man, I am.
Yeah.
And when you bring two Jasons together, something fun's gonna happen.
Something good's gonna happen. That's right.
That's right.
Yep. And Jason's also is it a wildlife biologist? What's your background in that?
True, man. So yeah, let me give you some cred, some street cred, or maybe forestry wildlife cred. But yeah, I cut my teeth, man, as a wildlife biologist at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, with my undergraduate. Worked on a graduate degree as well, but it's kind of a dual degree. So got very inundated in both forest and wildlife management. And yeah, man, I've got to see a few trees loaded up on the log truck and move down the road, which is a good thing.
Yeah, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. First, I'm going to take a break here and thank some sponsors, but we're going to be talking about our Whitetail Habitat Extravaganza coming up January 31st, and Jason is going to be the other speaker there, and we're going to talk about all the things that are going to be going on at that event. And then we're going to get into it, and we're really going to break down at a high level all the buzzwords and things that guys hear when it comes to property management. We're going to talk hinge cutting, hack and squirt, prescribed burns, timber stand improvement. We're going to talk about all that stuff today. So, Jason, thank you for being on the show. We're going to just take a quick break, thank a couple sponsors, be right back.
Awesome.
There's nothing more I love than chasing big bucks, and one of the biggest game-changing products for me and making me more successful is Moultrie Mobile cellular trail cameras. Anybody knows big mature whitetail, especially in high-pressure states like Pennsylvania, they're not going to put up with much from humans. So the best thing we can do is stay out of the woods, stay out of that property when it gets close to hunting season, and the Moultrie Mobile cellular trail cameras have been a game changer for me. They have affordable plans, great cameras. I encourage you to check out the entire line at MoultrieMobile.com. I am happy to announce a brand new sponsor here at the Field Days podcast, and it is 12 Point Hunting Blinds. And I've had the privilege of hunting out of these blinds for the last couple of years, and I was on a property consult earlier this year, and I asked my client what he did for a living, and he said he was one of the owners of 12 Point Hunting Blinds, and my eyes lit up, and I said, we need to talk. And we need to talk because these are the best blinds that I have ever hunted out of. They've thought of every little detail, from just the silent technology, the easy access, and I truly believe that their blinds are completely scent proof. I've so many times had deer directly downwind that never smelled us. So I encourage you, check them out, find out for yourself. But again, hands down, best hard-sided hunting blind I've ever hunted out of. For more information on all their blinds, visit 12pointhuntingblinds.com.
All right, Jason. So we are back, and let's jump right into it. I'm really excited because we put this out already, just a couple Facebook posts, and we're only going to be able to fit 500 guys. We went to a bigger venue. I did this a few years ago and sold out in like 6 hours, but I could only fit 120 people. But we put this out a little bit earlier than we usually do. But we have the Whitetail Habitat Extravaganza, and this is something that I've wanted to put together for a while. And I wanted it to be, when I did my first one, it was really just food plots, hunting your food plots, hunting strategy, and things like that. And I really wanted to make a full day for a property owner on covering the entire gamut, right? Like everything that goes into managing a property for whitetail. And that includes not just food, that includes cover, timber, all those kinds of things. So I couldn't think of a better guy. Jason was my very first call, and I was fortunate that he said, yeah, man, let's do it. So Jason is going to be the other speaker there that day. It's going to be a full day from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. And like I said, we can only take 500. We sold 100 tickets here in the first couple days already. So I know it's going to sell out, but I don't know how you feel about it, Jason, but I'm really excited about the event. I think I got guys coming from Kentucky and Michigan already.
Man, I like to hear that. I mean, in a state where we have more barrels of bourbon than we have people, that makes me real happy. But yeah, I'm excited about it as well. I mean, one of my favorite things to do is to try to work with people to help, put that vision into place on their property for what they want to do. And, a lot of landowners out there that I've worked with, they're like, well, hey, I want, I want deer, I want turkey, or I want quail or whatever. And there's some real specific goals that they want. And I always feel like we get to be kind of like an artist on the land, right? It's kind of like God's work where we get to go out there and really craft this thing out and drive it to be the best it can be. And so, man, I get fired up working with folks because seeing people that you've worked with and really get to change a property over time. And then folks are just like, man, I got more deer than I've ever seen. And man, now I'm really killing some good deer. And it makes the heart happy. So it's
right.
good stuff, man.
Yeah. And you and I are on the same page. I do a lot of property consulting, and there's nothing better than I like to do than going, telling a guy what to do. And then a year later, 2 years later, 3 years later, I start getting the pictures, the thank yous. And that's just an awesome feeling. And that's really what this day is all about. And it's going to be a day, just so everybody knows, it's going to start at 9 a.m. schedules to go to 3 p.m. We're going to have other, Jason and I are both going to be speaking. I'll be talking food plots and hunting strategy and food. And Jason's really going to be breaking down the cover, the timber, all the other things you need to do, on your property for whitetail. And we're also going to have a bunch of other vendors there as well. Coons Engineering is going to be there with a lot of their equipment. Great Plains is going to be there showing their seed drills, talking to Realtree, some other people. I know Turkeys for Tomorrow is going to be there. So we're putting together a bunch of different folks that are going to be there that you're going to get to talk to. We're going to have lunch that you can purchase there. We're fortunate the church here, which is just a beautiful facility, has great sound system, screen, can fit a lot of people. And, we made a deal and, hey, we're going to let you, use this event to raise money for their youth group to go on a mission. So it just all kind of came together. So it's going to be a full day with, talking property and hunting and management and all that. And I'm thrilled with, and we kept prices. My wife was mad at me. She's like, a full day, you need to be charging way more, but $20 a ticket, it's going to get you in the door. And, we sell 500, that's it. So I would tell you, go get your tickets now. You can get them at magnetoutdoors.com. And like I said, I'm super pumped. I think Jason's super pumped as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be a fun day. And literally, everything from weeds to trees, right, is what we're going to be hitting on. And we'll go into some great detail on anyone there. And honestly, the beautiful thing about having a group like this is we'll be able to interact and to try to get some real world scenarios out there on how anyone can better manage their property for whitetails, no matter what you have, because every property is different. And depending on where you are, what kind of dirt you have, or maybe sand, we can grow some critters for you.
Yeah, that's right. And, like you said, you hit the nail on the head. We're not going to be, I understand a lot of guys in Pennsylvania. I think the average landowner that owns land is like maybe 20 acres, and there's guys, you can do things on 20 acres. We're going to talk about smaller pieces, bigger pieces, something for everybody here. So get your tickets, magnetoutdoors.com. You can click on events. The tickets are there. So I wouldn't wait too long. I'd get in there and I'm going to be turning printed tickets loose to my Amish friends here pretty soon. And I know they're going to chew up a whole bunch of them. So if you want to come to the event, I wouldn't wait all that long to get your tickets. But Jason, I'm looking forward to seeing you. We've never actually met in person. It feels like we have because we've did so many of these podcasts, but it'll be actually the first time we've got to meet in person. So I'm looking forward to putting this event on with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Me too, man. I'm looking forward to getting up to Pennsylvania and, during the coldest time of the year, at least down my way, and see what we can make happen, man, for a lot of great people.
Well, I can tell you it's going to be cold in Pennsylvania too. So just wear your warm clothes.
Listen. If anyone knows me, I mean, I'm a little bit aerodynamic up top, and so Yeah, I may have to bring out the fur hat or something.
Yeah,
Make it happen.
you'll have to wear a beanie or something, but
Uh-huh.
we'll have the facilities nice and heated for you, but getting in and
Good.
out of the car you might get a little chilly, so just dress appropriately. So anyway,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
all right, so yeah, that one last time, Whitetail Habitat Extravaganza. It's going to be on January 31st. That's a Saturday. Get your tickets at magnetoutdoors.com. And now let's get in. Let's talk what we want to talk about today. And it's a lot of different things. And when I have Jason on here, it's like, hey man, I'm going to take advantage of this because he talks about a lot of things. Like I said, I do a lot of property consulting, and when it comes to timber stand improvement, things like that, I'm real leery, because you can really kind of screw things up. So, when I work with guys, it's usually I work with a forester in tandem, of hey, here's this guy's goals. I know what his goals are. I know where I want the cover to be. I know where I want the thick stuff to be. I know where I want the food to be. I know how I want it to lay out. But a lot of times, and how we get to that goal is a little bit different. And I want to have an expert that's giving me their expert opinion. And that's really, a guy like Jason here, can go in and say, hey, yeah, here's what you need to do. And pretty much everything from, like we said, prescribed burns to timber stand improvement and to all that stuff. So let's just get into it and talk about the different buzzwords that you hear out there. And maybe Jason, I'm jumping ahead. Maybe you want to, put it in context somehow, but I want to kind of break down what is hinge cutting? What are the benefits? What is a prescribed burn? What are the benefits? Timber stand improvement. How do you go about that? And I don't know if you want to put it, or if you just think it's best to break those down and just start digging into them, or if there's anything you want to do to put context around just a general habitat improvement overall.
Well, I mean, I'll tell you, I mean, the focus here is we're trying to grow deer, and we're trying to grow the kind of deer that we want to see, and I'm gonna shag up, but I mean, I got skulls all around the place, at my place, but I to do that, we have to manage pretty much everything, and the best way to look at this from a forestry perspective is if you're out there in your woods and literally the understory has just a lot of leaves and you got a lot of shade to the ground, then we got to do something, because you got to think about, from a forest management perspective, we're trying to grow deer all spring, summer into the fall long. Okay. And so there's just really a short window when mast is super important, because these deer are putting on all the nutrition by mowing down a ton of protein, okay, until that time frame. And so what we have to do is really remove some trees. And so there's a lot of different terminologies. We call it forest thinning. It could be a select harvest. It could be crop tree management. I mean, there's all of these different terminologies in the forestry perspective that we can discuss and break down. But let me just bare bones it. We just got to get some sunlight to the ground. Okay. And so if we get sunlight to the ground, we can grow the correct type of weeds underneath to really make some things happen. It's going to be great for deer. Bottom line.
Yeah.
Super simple.
I agree. Now, the thing I say too, and you kind of alluded to this a little bit, and I just want to get your thoughts on it, because maybe our opinions vary a little bit, and maybe I'm wrong, but I look at it, like I said, I got a lot of clients that I have and I go see, and I've did as low as 8 acres piece of property to 2,000 acres, right? But the average is probably 170 acres, 150 acres, right? And I've kind of always looked at it, when you have a small, it's all well and good to say, hey, we want to give food to the deer all year long. We want to hold deer all year long. But sometimes on smaller properties, just depending on what they are and how they're set up, they may not be that kind of property, and so I always go in and look at it from that standpoint. I say, listen, our goal with your property is going to be to kill a deer. And how can we have deer here from October and through the end of November, and we're not getting into, it just might not be feasible for every guy to say, hey, I want to manage the herd. I want to, I want to provide food for them and hold them here all year long. But other properties that may work, right? And am I looking at that the wrong way, or is that the wrong thing to tell a guy? Because, like I said, I look at, and sometimes depending on what your neighbors are doing, right? Like if you're surrounded by ag and, and all that, maybe they're doing the heavy lifting, right? And you're making the ideal hunting spot and the travel through area. So I guess my point is every land is, property is different. What the recommendations will be, for one guy that we say, hey, the goal with this property is, okay, what can we do to provide bedding and cover all year long? Excuse me, food all year long, hold these deer, give them great nutrition, grow big bucks, do it all, right? Where another piece of property may not be that way, depending on what they're surrounded by, what they have, and things like that. I'm just throwing that out there to get your thoughts on that and the different properties and what the goals might be for each property and how they might be different.
Yeah, I tell you, man, it's so diverse, and so we have to look at property size, location, everything going on, juxtaposition of habitat types. I'm throwing a big word out there, but basically where everything comes together. And so all of those things are important. Do you own the land? Do you lease the land? And so I've worked with a lot of folks that they're, in a group on a lease. And so they may not be able to implement some management techniques that's needed. Might be a small tract, just like you're saying. So yeah, I try to identify limiting factors. And so those limiting factors may be trying to grow deer or trying to kill deer, right? It's one of the two. And so what can we do to try to grow more deer, manage more quality deer? It's what most people are trying to do, trophy deer, so to speak. And how do we get them there? And if you got the property size, great. We can do more management, try to get you there. You got to think about, the dynamics of a whitetail deer. I mean, the ecology of a deer is that they cover a lot of ground, on average, whitetail, as far as their habitat needs, et cetera, they're covering about a square mile for their home range, which is about 640 acres ish. It may be smaller for some, may be larger for others. Come rut time, we know that these bucks and does will leave their core home ranges and go on what I call the walkabout. They're trying to find the best lady out there. That lady's trying to find the best man. And so, so all of this comes into play. I mean, I know I've had cameras out and man, I got 3 or 4 bucks. I'm like, man, these are awesome. And then they gone. And then all of a sudden somebody else shows up. And so, man, that's just a part of that rut and kind of the excitement of the year of knowing, what's coming around the corner. But I do feel like, depending on the landowners that are going to be with us, we should be able to provide any type of example of what someone can do at their level, whether it's 5 acres, 10 acres, 25 acres, 1,000 acres, to best manage that land for really that opportunity when you're out there wanting to hunt and have a really great time from the stand.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. And I agree with that 100%. And that's kind of how I've always looked at it, is every scenario is unique. And, and sometimes guys, they cherry pick things they hear on your podcast and it said, well, you said I need to manage the deer for all year long. It's like, well, no, we talked about that. I didn't say that's what you have to do, or that might work for your property. Your property may not lend itself to that. And it's like, okay, how can we make this a better hunting property? Or, maybe we can improve the cover and make it better all the way around. But anyway, the point is every scenario is different. And like you said too, every scenario is different based on the goal of the landowner too. If his goal is, yeah, I do want to hold them all year long, but I'm really not, I really don't care about that. I want to kill a deer in October or November, and that's all I want to do. Okay. Well, that might change the way we lay that out, and so that's just
absolutely.
Everybody's different. Yep. And the things we're going to go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry. Yeah. I mean, it's so crazy. I mean, every property's different. And, and you mentioned this earlier, you may have a neighbor that's got some beautiful soybeans that's in the ground and literally, that early season hunt may be phenomenal on your side, because if you got the right cover and you're trying to intercept from that deer where it's bedded to go feed, all of a sudden you having to grow a beautiful crop. That's something you don't have to worry about. Like, I ain't really worried about growing that food, but I would like to force this deer to go from this point to this point. Now, if it's a forester situation, so to speak, we could do a little bit of management in that forest and create one heck of a beautiful corridor to really funnel that deer exactly where you want it. Yep. And so there are some techniques and thinking about the wind, where the sunshine's going to be, depending on, what kind of terrain you're in, to really make all of that happen. And so that's where it gets really fun to me. It's like, it's kind of a puzzle. And
Yeah.
so we start putting that puzzle together, and then all of a sudden, you get those callbacks or folks going, man, look at this deer harvested. I'm like, yeah, that's awesome. So, when the plan comes together, I'm thinking like A-team now, like old school. Love it when a plan comes together.
Yeah, that's right. You hit the nail on the head. Anybody who listens to me and follows me, you hit the nail on the head of what I do. I don't have any, my biggest food plot's 0.7 acres. Most of them are 1/8 acre, quarter acre plots, but I'm surrounded by corn and soybeans, but I have all the cover, right?
Mm-hmm.
So for me, planting those small kill plots, and
Yep.
that also being said is I've killed the vast majority of my big bucks in the first week of season. Or the second week. If I get past the second week, I'm like, oh crap, because my property is just a phenomenal early season property.
Yep.
But then when we get to the rut, man, now it's I set 60 times last year trying to kill my deer. 3 years ago it was 70 times. It was just putting that time in and grinding and grinding and grinding it out. But and then that's how my property lays out. And the farmers around me do the heavy lifting, provide the destination sources. I just got to provide those small kill plots that a mature buck wants to stop in before he heads out to that destination source at dark. And so so anyway, everybody's different, every situation is different, and and that's so when you hear all this, it may not be right for we're just going to talk about the different things that you can do, but it may not be what you need to do. But we're going to tell you the advantages, disadvantages. And I think what we're going to do, Jason, is I think to start, let's just get into all the timber stuff, right? If that works for you, and the different things that you see, the things that come to mind for me is let's talk timber stand improvement overall. Like when is it a guy that he wants to have a habitat for whitetail? At what point in time when he's looking at his timber, does he need to do something? And we'll talk about that. Then we'll go into hinge cutting, and then possibly some hack and squirt, and then any other thing timber wise that you can think of. But just take it from there, and let's talk timber stand improvement overall. And when is it that a guy needs to look at saying, hey, I need to do something with my timber to make this better for whitetail?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll kind of take this, break this down into maybe some phases, so to speak, and age classes. In the Northeast, you're predominantly working in a mixed hardwood forest, and so which is beautiful. But a lot of folks, they miss opportunities for management, and your hardwoods in general. The first time that they really need attention, there's a window. Depends on what species it is, etc. But it's from about year 18-ish, okay, to about year 25 is a critical window. Let's say someone's acquired a property or they've had past management done, and they're in that window of really a young forest, okay? That is a critical time because your hardwoods are just kind of tinkering along. But when they have their most intrinsic growth, their fastest growth, is at that time frame. And so if you thin that forest at that time frame, you're going to get the most robust growth in your forest at that time, which is great. It's going to excel it on out, really targeting those great mass species. That's going to be great for deer. And we're talking about primarily oak trees. And so as we look at those and try to thin out any of the unwanted species, any of your softer wood, your maples, your ash, any of the others that really don't have a value for quote unquote deer, unless you just want to look at some pretty leaves. But that doesn't feed the deer. That's going to be important. So heavier thinning is important in order to get that forest propelled out to where you want it. Now, maybe you're further down the road in your forest stand environment where maybe you're in that typical, I see a lot of that 60 to 80, 100-year-old forest. And people are like, man, I can see way down through there. It's beautiful. I'm like, okay, that sucks. And don't get me wrong, I like to see as well and watch critters, but I want a critter right underneath me. I'm an archery hunter, and I want them I want to feel them breathing on my tree, right? I want them to rattle my soul. And so in order to do that, we have to be thinking about forest management. And so if you can see through the understory of your forest and there's nothing there, I can tell you right now, you ain't getting sunlight down, and you need to do something. And so it's pretty interesting to note that if we go in, let's say your forest is unlike any other. It's all oak trees. Let's say you got the perfect situation. You got 50 acres and nothing but solid oak trees everywhere. Man, that's awesome. You're thinking, well, what do? I don't want to cut any of my oak trees. Well, here's a interesting fact for you. If you know this, only 30% of your oaks produce pretty much all your mast. Okay. Think about this. 30% of your oaks are producing all the mast because you have these weaker ones. Genetics, we know there's a lot of research been done. Some of this I heard from Dr. Harper recently, even talking about the same thing with managing some oaks and how many of those are actually being productive. And you're like, okay, maybe I need to go in and thin some out for two reasons. So 70% of those oak trees are not doing you anything. Zero, zip, zilch.
They're hurting
so
you.
if you can go in and act, yes, they are. And so if you can go in and see which oak trees are dropping mass, which is typically your bigger, more robust crowns, et cetera, which is what we're looking for forest management. That's a big, beautiful crown. It's a dominant tree. We're going to leave that, baby. We're going to get these subdued trees out of the way. So now you basically are twofold. So for mast, you're going to actually improve mast on your property from that 30%. Maybe we just take it down to 50%. Going to be hard to figure it out, right? But let's just say we cut half the trees, but we leave the best trees that are producing mast for us. So now we got this beautiful mast acorns there in the fall going into winter, which is great for deer. A lot of carbohydrates there, helps deer over winter and attracts them to your property when you want to be hunting. But more importantly, let's fast forward to after we do this, we got a lot of sunlight to the ground. Now, if you look through the woods during the time of year, you see a lot of weeds. And man, that's great because now you're producing a high volume of food for all your deer for when you're trying to grow them. So now you're going to have deer on your property during those spring, summer, into fall months because they're mowing down the vittles. I'm telling you. And so all that sunshine coming to the ground is going to really get you where it will be. And then you're going to have more mass with less trees. I know that's hard to fathom, but that's how it works. And so trying to keep this as simple as possible, but with a little bit of tree thinning, okay, we can get you there. Now, if you want to have a lot of fun with this, this is where we start laying it out. And we start laying out like, well, maybe right through here, we cut a few more trees and we create this pathway corridor. If we know there's a key food source, there's a food plot, whatever it is, and we start really putting deer where we want them. And we got to think about how do we access this? Where do we want to set up our log index, which could be a future great wildlife opening, and maybe where we want to, maybe we have an access road in there. We're going to make that a little bit heavier on the thinning when we do that, just to provide more sunlight to the ground, better weeds along this edge, which is going to attract deer, and then also your road's going to be in better condition because you got sunlight drying them out. And so there's all these small little wins you can make so you can better access your property. You can now better access to a stand you want to get to. And I can tell you where those deer are likely going to come through when we create these little corridors and we make it the spot where you want to be hunting. So it, to me, gosh, it sounds like common sense. I talk about this way too much.
And you were saying too about when you thin that out and you get that undergrowth, right? Which is what you want. And you talked about it as being food, but also that becomes cover. Like
Absolutely.
the deer just feel, you hit the nail on the head. I went into a property in a beautiful piece on West Virginia. I mean, it was gorgeous. I kid you not, I could see 600 yards through their woods. And, I immediately said, listen, if this is for whitetail, this is some of the most beautiful woods I've ever seen, like it was gorgeous. But if you want this for whitetail, I mean, this is the barren wasteland, at least for, I said,
That's right.
and he's like, well, my wife really likes to ride and, and look through here. I go, do you want it to be a riding property? You don't want it to be a whitetail property, right? So I'm just going to give you what my recommendations are for a whitetail property. And man, everywhere that it's like this, I'm doing something, like I'm in some places I'm thinning, I might be cutting really heavy, whatever, but you hit the nail on the head. So the guy out there listening right now, the moral of the story is you go into your woods and you can see 100 yards, you got an issue, and you need to timber, and how you do that and how hard you do that is, there's a lot of variables and things, but you talked about then that sunlight hitting the ground and creating food, which it does, but then also some of the best cover I've ever seen is like on a clear cut, right? You do a clear cut and you get that, man, in 3 years,
it's pretty gnarly.
Gnarly, and the deer love it, and so there's different ways, and you talked about too, as a, me being a property consultant, I'll go in and say, okay, where do we want the cover to be? Where do we want the food to be? Where do we want the travel corridors to be? How are we going to hunt this, right? We're going to create this sanctuary right in the middle. Okay, well, this is where we want the thickest part of the property to be. So a lot of different things, but yeah, I just want to say, not only does it food that starts growing there, more food that the deer love, it's going to be some really good cover too. And it's going to be, and just my last point will be, and I hear guys talk about this a lot, and it's so true, especially with mature bucks. Mature bucks do not want to be somewhere that they don't feel safe in daylight hours, period. In the rut, they'll get up and run, but I'm talking, normally they do not want to be in a wide open, they don't feel safe, right? And creating that, now you're creating an area where, hey, a big buck is more likely to move and travel during daylight hours because he feels safe. So for me, that's a big advantage too.
So I'm just gonna throw out there, and I'm not being biased, but I'm gonna throw this out. All right. So if let's say you're the man of the family, you're the hunter, and your wife just wants to ride around, look at stuff. I'm gonna tell you right now, you take your wife out and you show her all these pretty flowers, and the understory and go, hey baby, listen, I just thin these woods out because I want to provide you flowers every day. All right. Now this might be a selling point, boys. Y'all take some notes out there. All right, because I've told people this before, and they're like, "Man, you're joshing me." I'm like, "No, I'm not. I'm being very serious." But if the disturbance timing is correct, and we create the good weed communities, for instance, we may have a lot of woodland sunflower. I don't know about y'all, but anybody ever plant sunflowers for deer? They eat the far out of it. So a little bit of helianthus being out there, beautiful, yellow flower going in the woods. I think your lady is going to go like, man, that sure is pretty. And man, I really like seeing these butterflies. Yeah. And then she's going to see a little fawn easing through the cover. And all of a sudden, that mindset of everything being clean and you can see changes. Yeah. Okay. And so it's all about perspective. And I talk about this a lot too, is like we grow up in homes and things that have smooth walls, and we got to keep our yard real clean and all this stuff. So our mindset is like, it's all got to be clean because it's smooth and flat edges. No, throw all that out the window. Yeah. We don't want any of that. When we're managing property, we want it to look kind of gnarly and different and weedy. Yeah. Weedy is good. Like I've had deer in my yard like drop fawns in like our native flower beds, okay? Because it's great cover, it's great food, and they feel really comfortable with that. But right here in my yard, even. Yeah. So some of my neighbors like, man, what are you growing back there? I'm like, man, that's my food plot. I mean, I like to have deer. I like to get up and watch them in the morning and the evening. And so that's just the mindset. We have to break the mindset of clean is good, clean is bad. Yeah. We want to have this unnatural type of look. We want different weed heights. We want a different types of weeds growing in variable places, and that's a good thing. So when you see all that, don't get alarmed. Just know you're creating really good habitat. Yeah. Simple.
One of the best things I ever learned was putting my mower away. And this is a guy who has a sponsor for a mower. Coons is my sponsor, and I still use my mower all the time for clearing food plots, clearing new food plots, mowing my perennial plots, mowing paths that I want. But I used to just go out and same thing. Oh, this will look pretty.
Recreational mower.
Yeah,
I know
man.
Who you are.
Because I like it, right? Well, I haven't done it for years, Now I get into it with guys. I don't, you may feel different from me, especially being a turkey guy. I fight with guys because there's this, and you might be mad at me on this, the whole, what do they call it? No mow May. Yeah, no mow May and no May. And they're even saying wait till July. Yep. I personally, my issue with some of that, and what I have a hard time doing, is if I wait till July to mow my food plot, my clover plots, I run a real big risk of losing them to weeds, and so I've gotten really good. I've never hit a turkey in my life. I've hit one deer in all my years of mowing, but I have 1/4 acre, 1/8 acre plots. I take a quick walk. I just go and
here's the good thing about all this is that those turkeys should not have a nest in a 1/4 acre clover plot. That's just not where they're.
And I rarely find them in that. Rarely, I think maybe. Yeah, go ahead.
Once those birds get big enough, they're going to go in there as brood range. I mean, no doubt, with all the turkeys that I may have harvested over the years, they do love clover. I mean, I have one of the birds I harvested, the last bird I harvested this year, which is in Kentucky, toward the end of season. This gobbler was loaded with white clover, loaded, and not actually at that time of the year. We don't have a lot of seed head, but just the leaves. Okay. And so when I pulled that crop open, it was solid clover. And the interesting thing, now I'm storytelling, so y'all got to bear with me, and I'm going to get back where I'm going here. But the interesting thing is when these birds fill up on that clover, it's something they need. All right. So when they're focused on something that's high protein or whatever, just like deer, that critter, that body of that animal is saying, we need to eat this for X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
We as people overthink it. But critters have this, satiability, so to speak, where they know it's the right thing to do. And so these smaller clover plots usually end up being good brood range. And so we don't really typically worry about those as a quote unquote nesting spot, unless on your property, that's the only place that the cover is right for a turkey. And so that's something I don't really worry about with these clover plots or really a managed food plot via mowing. Is you typically don't have the same issues because birds are not nesting in there.
Yeah.
But if you're managing your woods right, you're going to have a lot of deer throughout, a lot of good cover, and you're also going to hold a lot of turkeys.
Yeah.
Get me in the turkey-a-thon here because we can talk all day.
Yeah. No, I know. And so, I mean, I've went out with guys online. I'm mowing in June but like I said, I don't mow anything but my clover plots. That's the only thing that I do mow because, you wait till the end of June and you don't touch your clover plot. You got a real good chance of losing it here to weeds, So I take a quick walk. I've never hit a turkey. I've hit one fawn, and that's because I got lazy one day and I just started zipping around and, and didn't pay attention. And I'll tell you what, that wasn't enjoyable for me, hitting fawn like that. And I take a walk all the time now. So I think guys get a little bit crazy with it, and I get the point of it. And I like I told you, I put my mower, I don't recreational mow at all, period, anymore, at all, which I used to do a lot because, man, there's nothing better. And I'll give a good story about that. My dad, he has a little 60-acre farm. We built up the hill from him. And, he was talking to me one day. He's like, you go do all this property consult for all these other people. What do we need to do here? And I don't really hunt on this farm, my nephew and dad, and it's a smaller piece and I have other places to go. And I said, well, you see that section down there? It needs to look like that. He's like, that's ugly. Like, we ain't doing that, because my dad is go out, everything's mowed, everything looks nice. And me is living here, not hunting here. I like that. Right. Like, I'm kind of like, yeah, man. Oh yeah. That looks really nice. Keep doing what you're doing, Dad. I don't care. But when he asked me, I said, no, seriously, you put that mower away and let all this stuff grow up, let your farm grow up in its natural habitat. You'll hold way more deer and you'll have a chance at holding bigger bucks. Because right now he has the property where I talked about before, where those bucks end up at dark. There's a couple farmers, they plant corn and soybeans on it. And, it's a destination source. There's very, very little cover. And so that's what I told him. He's like, well, I'm not doing that. That's ugly. I said, well, deer like ugly, and so.
Yes, they do.
Yeah. I said,
ugly is good.
Yeah. When I consult with guys a lot of time, I'm like, listen, ugly. I found the uglier, usually the better, when it comes to cover.
Do we need to make a t-shirt about that? Ugly is good.
Yeah. Ugly is good when it comes to whitetail habitat. So
absolutely.
So yeah, maybe we'll sell that at the Extravaganza. But anyway, I agree with you on that. And it's funny to see guys, but for me, one of the best things I ever learned was putting that mower away just for recreational mowing. Mowers serve a tremendous purpose. I can clear, with my coons, I can, 2-inch thick, so I can cut with that thing. I can clear my new food plots. I mow my pass. I mow my clover plots with it. I still use it a lot, but I just don't do the recreational stuff that I used to.
Yeah, I mean, you got to look at things from a management perspective. So we have to keep the weeds in check over time, and so there is a time where mowing or disking or prescribed fire or whatever kind of disturbance, roller chopper, depending on where you are, is going to come into play to keep the weed community down. If the disturbance timing is good, we're going to create the smorgasbord of weeds that deer won't, and then we're going to keep management cost at bay. And so if you wait too long, over time, the cost to bring that vegetation back down to where it needs to be goes up tremendously.
That's right.
So depending on where you are in the U.S., it's quite variable. If we're in the deep South, up through the mid-South where I am in Kentucky, ideally, I'm going to tell you, ideally, you want to be on a 2-year rotation managing your woods or your fields or whatever it is, because on year 3, and I've managed a lot of large projects before, and by year 3, what you see is the woody stem invasion comes in. I don't care if there's a pine tree you can see a mile away and you can see it, it's going to put a seed there, and all of a sudden you're going to have a huge pine tree or something else, right?
Yeah.
And so now your cost to get that back down, you're like, man, I may have to put like a Brown's tree mower in, or I may have to come in and use a mulcher or something. By year 4, it's usually gone. Okay.
Yep.
In the way deep South, on properties I've tried to manage from Florida, coastal plain, U.S., Georgia, you name it. By year 3, it's gone. I mean, you just cannot do anything with it. And so trying to get people to think about, as I think, broadly in the wildlife management scheme, talking about deer and turkey over time, a lot of folks have really pushed on this. Hey, every 3 to 5 year interval is good. Well, I'm going to tell you right now, 3 to 5 years, let's throw that out the window. We really need to be focused on a 2 to 3 year window. Some places in the way deep South, quality dirt, you may be trying to do some kind of disturbance annually on some spots, okay, which is crazy. On average, I'd say we probably need to set the standard to 2 years. So if you miss something by year 3, you can still handle it. As you move further north, especially in the Northeast, upper Midwest, you can get away with going to that 3rd year to do management typically, just because you have a shorter growing season.
Yeah.
But if you really want to keep the weed community in check, 2-year rotations is very important.
Yep. Now you're talking 2-year rotations. You're talking 2-year rotations in like a food plot, or are you talking actual timber stand, like something like specifically?
All across the board. So
Okay.
let's talk about just trying to maximize edge habitat, trying to manage understory habitat, trying to just manage weed communities at large. If I could light a match even on the edge of a food plot, right? A lot of your food plots are depending on what kind of food plot you have, right? It may be a perennial, could be an annual, could be a blend. And so on those, much different. But in general, at a scale, if you're really trying to keep things in check, maximize your food resources on the smallest, maybe you just have 5 acres with a 1 acre food plot and 4 acres of forest, okay? Well, that 1 acre food plot's fantastic, but I can maximize 4 more acres of food to bring deer to your property if we manage the understory and try to keep that understory managed on a 2-year regime.
Okay.
And so there's a lot of techniques to do that, but the more you do that and you keep the weeds in check, the better. And if you disturb at the correct time of year, right? If you're doing it in the middle of summer, you can get a poor weed community come back in general. Okay. And so what we see when we move that disturbance timing back into late summer, really going into the fall, and then into over winter, the weeds in the seed bank come up that are really ideal for deer and for turkey.
Yeah.
And so what we see is a lot more heavy legumes and heavy seeded, quote unquote, natural type grasses, panicums and other things that almost resemble like a grain sorghum, but in a miniature mode, right? Almost like a brown top millet, which I will tell you the critters love. And so if we can do the disturbance timing at the correct time of year and at the correct interval, we can maximize that food resource. We can also maintain cover, okay, over time, because once it gets out of control, it's out of control, and then you can't do anything with it. And then now you're like, well, dang, man, I got to put a lot of money to get this back to where it needs to be. Well, divvy it up, on the smallest acreage. Maybe you have, 5 acres, 1 acre food plot, 4 acres of woods. We split that woods up into 2 acre areas, right? And we rotate it. And so every year you're in there doing a little something. And so you're maximizing keeping the best food and cover on your small tract all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, it's that simple.
Yeah.
And so that's how you got to think about this. You scale that up as your acreage increases. Maybe some things you can't do everything, but the little things you can do can really maximize the benefits for your deer on your property.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we're at 45 minutes already, and I had a whole bunch of other things. So I'm going to, if we can just skim through, and we'll have you back and we'll talk maybe more in depth, but, guys here, hinge cutting, hack and squirt, prescribed burns, real quick, just, 2-minute on each or whatever, when's the guy want to do that? What's the advantages? What's the disadvantages? All that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Plethora of things, forest thinning in general, disturbance timing. Anytime you get in thin your forest and woods is good. And ideally, with most of your hardwood settings, you're going to be trying to thin down to probably a 60 to 70 basal area, which means you're going to get a lot more sunlight to the ground. Anytime you can do that is good. And so really focused on maintaining your key hardwood species. With any type of timber stand improvement, there's a lot of ways you can grid that out. So I think there's a ton of opportunities to discuss like patchwork, shelter wood thinnings, corridors, the whole 9 yards. But those are a lot of techniques you can use to really get you there. Some of the smaller type things like hinge cutting can really produce, sunlight cover in one area really quickly. Something I know Jason and I talked about in the past was that's great, but now you're going to have kind of a messy spot over time that you're going to have to do something with. Once that hardwood is on the ground, it just doesn't go away overnight. And so you have to think about that. But those can be in small areas, very selective, basically trying to remove, species that you don't want. It can be on the edge of an opening. It can be in the middle of the woods where you're really trying to target keeping deer really to bed and then moving as a corridor back to a key feeding spot. And so there's a lot of techniques to do that. And as you have time and ability, whether you get a chainsaw or truly get in there with some herbicide, like a hack and squirt, in order to really kill those trees. And you're just taking like a hatchet, zipping around, or you can take a chainsaw and zip a thin layer around the cambium, put a little bit of herbicide in there, kill that tree. It's going to die out. You're going to get sunlight to the ground. You're going to get a lot of weeds coming up in one spot. You can create corridors that way. You can work around your openings the same way as a really low intensive method, but just know that you have a dead snag that's going to eventually fall over and die. All right.
Yep.
So those are some of those things to consider or think about with some of those methodologies, but you can do that at a scale. I've had crews come in on an entire forest where we have some unwanted species, and we've thinned out the understory doing a hack and squirt, which is fantastic. So there's a lot of methodologies in there that make it pretty simple and easy to address your goals on your property.
Yeah.
And we can do that with a very minimalist approach, or you can contract it out and get it done, snap, crackle, pop, Rice Krispies kind of thing. So it's good.
Yeah. And there's a lot of YouTube videos out on all that. Now, my understanding of hinge cutting, and I want to move pretty quick. We've all experienced this as on my own properties and things. It's when you see that tree fall over, right, and it's on the ground. Some of the best deer sign I've seen ever is deer around a tree that just fell. You know what I'm saying? And so, am I wrong on this? When you hinge cut, the goal is to keep the tree alive for a while. That you hinge cut it in a way so when it's laying down, it's just not only cover, getting sunlight, but it's also a magnet food source. Is that correct? I mean, is that the goal when you're hinge cutting, is to try to keep the tree alive so that when it's over, it's not only cover, but it's food source and getting sunlight to the ground?
Depends on the type of tree.
Yeah.
And so you can hinge cut a tree that's not a preferred species for whitetail, and it's really, besides you're providing cover, but it's not going to provide food. So
Sure.
depends on the tree species, depends on the time of year you do it. And I'll say this because I've managed a lot of timber sales in the past, and cutting tops, etc. And I'll give you an example at Land Between the Lakes, doing a project and where they have actually fallow deer. It's pretty interesting.
Okay.
But we're doing a project there, and fallow deer and whitetail deer, the tops of the trees, when we cut them down, the deer were late in the evening. I was out there, and I'm like, my God, there must be 100 deer out there mowing the tops down. A lot of nutrition is found at the tips of the trees. And what we can do is we really amplify the effects of when you cut something and it produces a lot of quote unquote vegetation that shoots back out, whether it's completely cut over or it's a hinge cut. It accelerates nutrition into a small portion of that tree, right? And so that little top, those little buds and things that start shooting off, have more nutrition in those because that tree is it goes into survival mode.
Yeah.
So it's dumping all of its resources out in that one spot. And so, yes, it becomes a magnet, but it's got to be the right species.
Yeah.
So if it's a black cherry, nah, ain't gonna do you any good.
Yeah.
But if it's something that a deer prefers, let's say it's a quote unquote an oak species in general, they're gonna hit it hard.
Yeah.
And so once again, you got to be very deliberate and be thinking about what tree you're going to hinge cut and the timing you do it if you're going to make the most for it.
Yeah, perfect. Well, like I said, we're at 50 minutes, and we want to take I do a section now where I take a listener's question. So we're going to do that. Before we get to that question, I'm going to take a quick break. Thank a couple of our sponsors. We'll be right back.
I plant over 30 acres in food plots every single year, and I cannot afford to be losing time with equipment that is not reliable or gets the job done. And I'm proud to have Coons Engineering as my equipment sponsor here at Field Days. Their equipment is built like a tank, from their mower that I can create a new plot to mow my perennial plots, to their cultipackers, to the chisel plow that you see me using all the time that I use with just my quad to break ground and plant new food plots. If you're looking for good quality food plot equipment, I encourage you, check out the very best at KUNZENG.com.
All right, Jason, we are back, and I'm pulling up the question now that I had for today. It's a good one. And we're just going to take some time and answer this. So this is Tim from Ogdensburg, New York. Hey, Jason, I've been listening to your podcast for a long time, and I've learned a lot. I have about 90 acres and some mature timber. I really want to make the property a whitetail property. What would you suggest? Thanks, and I'm looking forward to planting some magnet outdoor seeds this fall. Thanks, Tim. That's awesome. I appreciate the support, and I think we've answered a lot of these questions. And I'm gonna hop in here real quick, Jason, and just tell guys what I do when a guy's looking at doing this. And we've already talked about if you're in your timber and you can see a long ways, I do a lot of property consulting, and if there I see, hey, you have a cover issue, you got a lot of mature timber here. My first thing, and Jason, you can tell me if I'm wrong, and I've been on consults where I've actually had a forester there with me, and other ones where I've went and said, hey, you need to get a forester in here as soon as possible to have him look at this and tell you what you can do, because it's just too open. You have no undergrowth. There's too much shade. And like we already talked about earlier, if you can see a long ways, it's just not doing you any good when it comes to whitetail. And what I'll say when I do that is I found, I think in anything, there's better foresters than others. I think sometimes, and you may disagree with me on this, but when you're saying, hey, I want this property to be whitetail, a lot of times a forester will come in and they're in the mindset of you getting timber value every so often and not maybe being as aggressive in certain areas. So what do you want the property to be? Do you want it to be a whitetail property? Do you want it to be where you're getting all kinds of timber value every years? And you need to communicate your goals clearly with the forester, because I think sometimes it's a little bit different in a whitetail guy than what it might be a guy, just a general landowner who's trying to get value out of his timber every so often. And so for me, what I tell guys is I want a forester in here, and generally I talk to them, and they will, they're glad that we had the conversation, because it is a little bit different than what they maybe necessarily would have usually recommended for Joe Schmo. So that to me is my advice to him. I'm gonna let Jason hop in and tell me if I'm wrong in any of that. But my advice is when you have a timber issue, a mature, is to get a forester in there as soon as possible, because I always tell people food's easy, cover's hard, cover takes time. Like you can't go a food plot, you can go in and get in and a season, right? If you have a cover issue, that's a bigger issue and sometimes takes a little bit more time and work. So it's something I encourage guys get started with sooner than later. So I'll stop rambling and let you hop in, Jason, see if I said anything wrong, but that's generally my advice in a situation with a guy asking something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. 90 acres, mature hardwoods. If you taught the forest, he says, "Oh, clear cut, it's going to be great for deer," I'd go, "No." Let's look at a thinning. Let's look at getting multiple bids on the timber. Let's look at only marking your timber as well, so it's not a operator select. Operator select can definitely be an issue. I would be marking some of the most quality oaks out there and hardwoods that is going to provide a food source really for your deer, and so attract the deer at the right time of year. And then from there, it's just a matter of lining that cell up. So yes, you are spot on. You have to have that educated discussion. And I'm going to be honest with you, with working with a lot of folks that I've come in kind of on the backside of a decision already made. But when you got a mature forest, something that may have taken 80, 100, 125 years to grow, it's very important we're making wise decisions, because if you cut it today, it's not like it's going to grow back real quick. And so I would highly advise, if you get any gut feeling that this forester's not the one, that's okay. If someone says, "Hey, man, this is my friend that always does this," that I'll be honest with you, sometimes that's a red flag. And what I've seen is some folks really taken to the bank, where somebody comes in and they tell someone like, "Hey, we'll do this for deer," and they high grade it. They basically cut out some of the best trees. They leave the worst quality trees on the property, and then the landowner's just sitting there. They lost money, and they really are not going to fulfill their dream and vision on that property,
Yeah.
because the opportunity's gone. So it's a very important time to really take your time and make sure you really weed out people. Work with folks like Jason or I, right?
Yeah.
The J&J play here is important, because we understand. We are deer, turkey, we're critter nuts. Okay. I don't know how to better put it, but I like to manage, forest fields, you name it, for a wildlife value. That's what I love. I know, and the people I work with, that's what they love. And so make sure you're working with someone that can give some of that guidance. Work with that forester to make sure it's going to be done correctly for what you want.
Yeah.
Simple.
Yeah. Perfect.
I'm preaching.
And I'll say, to guys too, is, understand the difference between a forester and a timber guy, who's just coming to cut timber. It's
Just a logger, right?
Yeah,
That's very important.
and I've been on properties that, so I didn't have before. I just had the timber company come in, and they're there for dollar signs, right? Like you said, a lot of times, and not all of them, but a lot of them will come in and they're going to take the highest value trees. They're going to leave all the junk, and it didn't really do you a lot of good. Maybe even hurt your property, right? So you need to be careful, and that's what I always tell guys is get a good don't just go with the first forester. Talk to 2 or 3. I'll be willing to guarantee you there's 3 or 4 probably in your area that you can talk to. It's like anything else. Hey, how much experience do you have in doing this really for whitetail, but being responsible and doing this the right way, right? Make some calls, take your time. It's a big decision, but my advice is don't, we're all getting older, right? And like I said, timber stand improvement is a process, right? It's not like putting a food plot where I can go get a food plot in here in a year and have it grow that hunting season. It can be a process. And so don't wait on it, but like Jason said, take your time and do it right. Don't be in such a hurry that you make a bunch of mistakes. But yeah, that's just my advice on that. And it was a great question, Tim. I appreciate it, and I appreciate you sending that in. So Jason, we're a wrap. Go ahead and let everybody know your company, how they can obviously with Turkeys for Tomorrow, how they can become a member,
Sure.
all that good stuff.
Yeah. Appreciate you having me on, and love these conversations and trying to help people. But yeah, I work as our CEO for Turkeys for Tomorrow. You can find us on any of the social platforms. Turkeys for Tomorrow. Just look us up. Come to our webpage, turkeysfortomorrow.org. We're very easy to find. Reach out to us, click on the button, call us. We will respond, and we're trying to work with people where they need help.
Yep. Perfect. And you can come meet Jason in person at the Whitetail Habitat Extravaganza in January. Like he's gonna be there talking. We talked about a lot today, but he's gonna have about 2.5, 3 hours. He's gonna be able to talk about all this stuff. So bring your notebooks, and it's gonna be in depth. But yeah, again, the Whitetail Habitat Extravaganza, Jason, I'm super excited about it. I'm excited that you're gonna be speaking with me that day. It's going to be an awesome day for guys. And if you want to get your tickets, I wouldn't wait forever. You can get them at magnetoutdoors.com. And I want to wrap up by saying to everybody, as everybody knows, I launched my food plot seed company, and the response has been overwhelming. We couldn't start until July 1. Nobody knew who we were. Sales have been awesome. So I appreciate all you guys that listen to my podcast, that follow me online, buy and seed. That's why if you saw me during this podcast, I was looking down at my phone. Now owning my own business, I'm trying to answer questions for the food plot seed company, and guys are lighting me up. So I apologize a couple of times that I was distracted, but I appreciate all you guys out there that follow me and giving Magnet Outdoors a chance. And I look forward to anybody coming to the Whitetail Habitat Extravaganza. I look forward to seeing you. And Jason, thank you once again. It was a great show. I appreciate you being here.
Yeah, appreciate you having me on, and looking forward to meeting a lot of great people just right around the corner.
That's right. All right, so we're gonna sign off, and I think I only have 1 or 2 more podcasts to do in this session, and it's time to kill some deer. So yeah, let's get to it. So again, thank you, Jason, and thank you all for joining, and we'll talk to you next week.
Thanks.